This was destined.
The Los Angeles Clippers are one of the many teams on the hunt for the NBA title during the 2021 season. While the Clippers traditionally have played second fiddle to the main attraction in the city, the Lakers, they do have a talented roster this season with names such as Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and it's not hard to see why some might predict them doing better this season. But how did their roster change during the offseason? In this video, we're going to go into the additions and subtractions that the Lakers have made. Off-season losses. Every NBA team subtracts some players before the current season, and that includes the Clippers. However, there's really only one player they lost this offseason that's going to be a significant missing presence on the roster, and that player is Montrezl Harrell, who didn't come to a deal with the Clippers in free agency and chose to take his talents across town and join their rivals. It's pretty scandalous to go from the Clippers to the Lakers, considering the rivalry between the two, but at the end of the day, it's not that surprising. Moving between teams within the same city eliminates the need to change houses and pack bags, and since the Lakers and Clippers play in the same arena, Harrell won't even have to find a different parking spot when showing up for home games. As far as how he fits into the Lakers lineup, he's coming off a season where he was Sixth Man of the Year for the league, and we can expect him to play a similar role with the Lakers. If you're looking at Harrell's numbers with the Clippers, you would probably have no idea he was a sixth man and not a regular starter. He had 18 points per game, 7 rebounds, and 1 block. The Clippers look like the loser, and Harrell and the Lakers look like the winners in this one. Harrell is moving to a better team that is coming off a title season and getting paid more to do so, while the Clippers lose one of their more productive players. Most of the players that they moved on from this offseason weren't nearly as relevant, though. One other notable name is Joakim Noah, but Noah will be more familiar to fans for his previous accomplishments than he did anything as a Clipper for. He's been an all-star a couple of times, won Defensive Player of the Year, but those accomplishments are well in the past. The most recent had even come in 2014, and Noah might be out of the league after being waived from the Clippers at age 35. He hasn't honestly looked too great playing for his next few teams after leaving the Chicago Bulls, where he did have his best years, where he was playing with the likes of Derrick Rose and Jimmy Butler that challenged others in the Eastern Conference. And his statistics across the board have been declining too. He only finished with 5 games and 3.2 rebounds per game for the Clippers during his time within the franchise. After Noah couldn't get into a better role with the Clippers, it looks unlikely that he's going to end up with another team, given both his age as well as his declining stats. The Clippers lost 2 other players in free agency. Starting off, JaMychal Green, who ended up going to the Denver Nuggets, who had been a role player for the Clippers. The thing is that they really won't be taking a big hit statistically from the departure, even though Green played 20 minutes in a game in his second season with the organization. His main attribute was rebounding, as he contributed 6.3 rebounds per game to the Clippers. The other free agency departure was Jonathan Motley, who left and signed a training camp deal with the Phoenix Suns during the offseason. However, despite the deal, it doesn't look like he's made the actual roster, and he hasn't featured in a game for the Suns. 2 players other than Noah also departed the team via waivers: Justin Patton, who joined the Bucks, and Kai Bowman, who found himself without a team. Additions. The Clippers have a couple notable additions from free agency: Serge Ibaka and Nicholas Batum. While neither of these additions will turn a team into a championship one on their own, they do bring some skills as veterans that should help back up the talent that the Clippers already have on the roster. Batum's a 12-year-old veteran going into the season, and Ibaka is an 11-year veteran that has a lot of experience as one of the key pieces to the OKC Thunder, and that was led by Russell Westbrook along with Kevin Durant. So this season, the Ibaka signing has been especially productive, as he has consistently appeared in games for the Clippers and has been their leader in rebounds per game. This is one area that the Clippers are behind in compared to some other teams competing for the title. They don't have a big center to dominate the boards or even lead the rebounding category, leaving Ibaka to come in first place in rebounds per game with 6.5. Ibaka had previously played with the Toronto Raptors, but apparently the Raptors didn't see his performance as good enough in order to bring him back at the age of 31. So far, he has been able to prove that he's still got a little bit of game left in the tank, even if he's only playing 24 minutes per game, as opposed to higher totals from earlier in his career. Ibaka was at one point playing 30 minutes per game with the OKC Thunder, but that role has since changed a bit with a couple of teams later in his career. The other big signing in free agency for the Clippers is Nicholas Batum, and the Clippers are getting more than what they've expected here. Like Ibaka, Ibaka, Batum has often been featured on the court without missing games this season and has played 28 minutes per game so far. With these numbers, he has contributed 10 points per game and 4.8 rebounds per game. His 1.3 steals per game is also the second highest of the Clippers, behind Kawhi Leonard, who is expected to dominate that statistic for as long as he's on the team. The Clippers turning Batum into a decent role player is a reclamation project gone right. A little while ago, it had kind of looked like Batum might be out of the league. He was playing with the Hornets on a big contract that looked like one of the worst in the league at the time. Charlotte had banked on his potential, and Batum seemed to fall off after getting on the team, with only 22 games and 3.8 points per game during his final season with the franchise. And even within those 22 games, Batum was only a starter for 3 of them. But the Clippers have found something that works for them with Batum, because they've made him a starter each game, and his numbers have risen even after everyone thought he would be out of the league or co-signed to riding the bench. And while it's early in the season and statistics do tend to even out, even if you give him more time, Batum is shooting more than 50% right now and has otherwise become a far more efficient player than he was with the last team. Draft day trade. The Clippers added another player on draft day, but they did it without making the pick themselves. Instead, they traded for the player that was selected with a 33rd overall pick near the beginning of the second round. That player is Daniel Oturu, a more raw prospect with 2 years of college experience and a big jump up in stats the second year that boosted him into the NBA draft talks. Oturu scored 20 points per game during his season with the Minnesota Golden Gophers, while registering 2.5 blocks per game and 11.3 rebounds per game as a center. Those numbers sound good at first glance, and even some of the top prospects taken at the position don't have any numbers that look close to that. So why didn't Oturu get drafted even higher in the first round? Professional scouts don't just evaluate games when looking at college prospects, but also how the player is going to adapt to the pro game physically. In the case of Oturu, he's undersized for a center and will have to play a different position in the NBA. He is 6'8", and any of the larger 7-foot centers in the league would have a dominant advantage over him if he remained in his current position. But despite needing a position change, Oturu still has enough upside that the Clippers have decided to make the trade with the Minnesota Timberwolves to acquire him. Oturu hasn't been playing all that much this season, but the Clippers are keeping him on the bench for the most part, and it looks like they plan on having him learn from an NBA coaching staff and from other veteran players at the position. Those players include Ibaka and Marcus Morris, so there is plenty of good names worth taking lessons from for a new rookie coming into the league after being picked in the second round. It might take Uru longer to pan out compared to some other players coming into the league this year as more established prospects, but based on his numbers in college, it is worth at least keeping an eye on him. Their outlook. Traditionally, the Clippers have been a team for the past decade or so that has some talent, but just doesn't know how to put it all together. It's not that they've been a bad team per se, but they just haven't been able to get over the hump and do more than play entertaining basketball. I mean, we saw the Clippers even try to win the talented trio of Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, and DeAndre Jordan when each of those players were in their primes, but those teams ended up being more known for flashy dunks than for getting results. Things might be different this time with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George steering the ship instead of Blake Griffin and Chris Paul. Both of them seem more committed to winning than Griffin was, and right now, the Clippers are right on the heels of their crosstown rivals to take the first place in the Western Conference. While they don't have a trio of superstars like some of the other teams in the league like the Nets, their 2 stars are backed by good role players like the ones that we mentioned before, Batum and Ibaka. Ultimately though, we really don't know what this team is made of until they play the final stretch of the season and get into the playoffs. We've seen plenty of deceivingly good Clippers teams that can't pull through once they get to a playoff series. Well guys, that's it for the video. We hope that you enjoyed watching, and if you did, please leave a like to the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you can, hit that post notification bell so you're kept up to date on all the videos we put out there. Until next time guys, we'll see you around.